Sometimes the single news story just blows up so many conflicting details. It's hard to know what's what. That's kind of what grabbed us about the recent events at the Delaney Hall ICE facility in Newark, New Jersey. We saw a Democratic mayor, members of Congress involved in this confrontation, and it's really sparked a huge debate.
Yeah, what's really striking is just how differently it's being described. Totally different stories. Like, depending on who you ask, it's either, legitimate oversight being blocked, or it's a dangerous security breach, assaulting federal officers even. So our goal today is to really dig into this. We'll look at news reports, different outlets, official statements, even some online chatter, just to understand what happened and maybe the bigger questions it raises, about immigration, congressional power, the law itself.
Exactly. And we've got a pretty diverse set of sources here. Different news angles, government releases, like you said, even some unfiltered online reactions. So yeah, let's get into it. We're going to try and unpack this clash at Delaney Hall, the opposing views, and, well, the legal and political mess that followed. What's really at the heart of this? Let's try and figure it out together.
Okay, let's start with the basics. Timeline, location. This all went down May 9th, 2025, at the Delaney Hall ICE detention facility. That's in Newark, New Jersey. And the key players involved: Newark Mayor Ras Baraka and 3 Democratic representatives: LaMonica McIver, Robert Menendez Jr., and Bonnie Watson Coleman.
Okay, so these officials show up at the ICE facility. What was their stated reason for being there?
Well, they said they were there for an oversight visit. That was the term used. Their main concerns, at least officially, were about how detainees were being treated inside and transparency at the facility.
Okay, treatment and transparency.
Yeah, and they also brought up questions about permits, operating permits for the facility, and whether it was following Newark City codes.
Ah, so there was maybe some pre-existing issue there with the city.
Seems like it. Something the city had apparently been looking into already.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's their side. What about DHS, the Department of Homeland Security? How did they see it?
Well, DHS paints a very different picture. Very different. They described the officials' arrival as more like an aggressive attempt to get inside without authorization.
Aggressive.
Yeah, suggesting it wasn't, a properly scheduled visit following protocol. They mentioned needing 24-hour notice, typically. DHS even pointed to video footage. They claim it shows Representative McIver physically pushing through officials, implying force was used.
Wow. Okay, so right off the bat, 2 totally clashing narratives about how it even started. The Democrats say lawful oversight. They waited over 2 hours.
Right.
And they claim ICE agents actually created an unnecessary and unsafe confrontation, and that led to Mayor Baraka's arrest. And McIver specifically denies body slamming anyone, right? That was a specific claim.
Yes, she's directly refuted that claim. Absolutely denied it. And it's probably helpful to understand a bit about Delaney Hall itself.
Okay, yeah. What's the deal with the facility?
It's privately run, operated by a company called the GEO Group. And ICE has said that this facility holds people with serious criminal histories. They've used some pretty strong language.
Like what?
Alleged killers, MS-13 members, people accused of child sexual abuse. That's the population ICE says is detained there.
Okay, so ICE is framing it as a high-security situation.
Definitely. And adding another layer here, the city of Newark had actually sued GEO Group before this.
Oh, really? About what?
About those operating permits and safety inspections we mentioned, though DHS denies there were issues.
So there was definitely bad blood there already between the city and the facility operator. That context seems important.
It absolutely does. It likely fueled the concerns the officials brought that day.
Okay, so things escalate. Let's talk about the arrest itself. Mayor Baraka gets arrested. What for?
Trespassing. It's a Class C misdemeanor in New Jersey.
A misdemeanor. Okay, and how did he react?
Well, he felt he was targeted. He made that point quite clearly. Said he was the only one arrested, put in a cell, even though he claimed he was actually let in by the GEO Group just before that to join a press conference the others were holding.
Interesting. So he's saying he was allowed in, then arrested.
That's his assertion, yes. Complicates the trespassing charge, doesn't it?
It does. But then the charges were dropped pretty quickly, weren't they?
Yeah, surprisingly quickly. The U.S. attorney decided to dismiss them. The official reasons given were for the sake of moving forward and in the spirit of public interest. Kind of vague, but...
I'm trying to smooth things over.
Potentially. And maybe as part of that, the U.S. attorney also invited Mayor Baraka to tour the facility properly at a later date.
Okay, so an attempt to de-escalate, at least regarding the mayor. But that wasn't the end of the legal story. Representative LaMonica McIver. She's facing federal charges now. What are those exactly?
Yes, and these are serious. She's facing federal allegations of assaulting, impeding, and interfering with law enforcement officers.
Wow.
It falls under Title 18, U.S. Code, Section 111A1, basically assaulting federal officers while they're doing their job.
And what kind of penalties could that carry?
Prosecutors have mentioned potential felony charges, felonies, which means, possible significant jail time if she's convicted. We're talking more than a year plus fines. It's not a misdemeanor.
Definitely serious. So what's the basis for these charges? What do the authorities and witnesses say happened?
Well, DHS and various accounts describe her actions as forcibly pushing through officials. Some use stronger terms, like you heard before, body slamming, bulldozing.
Okay.
There are also claims she was shoving agents, hitting them in the back with closed fists.
Closed fists.
That's what some accounts allege. And also that she physically blocked them from handcuffing Mayor Baraka when they were inside the facility.
That is a very different picture from her denial. What's her response to all this?
She strongly denied it all, called the charges purely political. She argues they're misrepresenting what happened, twisting it, basically to scare off legitimate congressional oversight.
Right. The deter oversight argument.
Okay.
So predictably, this whole thing has just lit up the political world. How have Republicans reacted?
Well, on the Republican side, people like Jack Ciattarelli called the whole visit a stunt. Pretty dismissive. Mark Green, the House Homeland Security Chair, strongly backed the charges against McIver, called her behavior lawless, criminal behavior, and said it's on video.
So they're leaning heavily on the video evidence claim.
Seems that way. Former DHS Secretary Kristi Noem chimed in with, "No one is above the law." And Tom Homan, former acting IC head, warned about crossing a line and confirmed he was working with the U.S. Attorney on the investigation.
Okay, so a pretty unified front there, law and order, condemning the actions. What about the Democrats?
Well, as you'd expect, a totally different take. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy and Mayor Baraka himself were outraged by Baraka's arrest initially, called it unjust federal overreach. And House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, he called the charges against McIver extreme, morally bankrupt, said there was no factual or legal basis.
Strong words.
Very strong. And a core argument from their side is that members of Congress do have the right to unannounced oversight visits, that it's part of their job.
Right, the oversight function.
Exactly. And they've also suggested this could be, the previous administration trying to intimidate Congress, maybe even weaponizing the DOJ.
That weaponization charge comes up a lot these days.
It does, and it seems like that video evidence is a real sticking point, isn't it? Republicans say it shows assault, Democrats disagree.
Yeah, what's the discrepancy there?
Well, like you said, some point to it as clear proof, case closed. Others argue it's being misinterpreted. Maybe McIver was reacting to being pushed herself.
Okay.
Or maybe the contact was just incidental in a chaotic moment. Hard to say without seeing it all, really.
Context is everything with video, I guess. And what about online? You mentioned looking at a Reddit thread. What was the vibe there?
Oh, it definitely reflected the political divide. Deeply polarized. You saw accusations of a fascist playbook, people calling it a political prosecution. Definitely the weaponizing the DOJ theme again.
Any other specific angles?
Yeah, some commenters specifically brought up the fact that Representative McIver is a Black woman, questioned if race played a role in the charges being filed against her specifically, and just a lot of speculation about how the case might actually play out legally.
So this whole incident feels like it's about way more than just what happened at the gate on May 9th. It taps into some bigger stuff, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's really a snapshot of these huge political tensions we see all the time.
Yeah.
Around immigration policy, for sure. And also this fundamental question about congressional oversight versus the executive branch. Where are the lines?
Right. And you mentioned the local issues, too. The city versus GEO Group.
Exactly. That ongoing friction is part of the backdrop. And you can't ignore the local politics in Jersey either. It's competitive. Mayor Baraka is in a gubernatorial primary coming up.
That adds another dimension.
It certainly could. And it's fascinating how both sides keep invoking the rule of law.
Yeah, I noticed that. Both sides claim they're upholding it.
But they mean very different things by it in this context, don't they? Is it about securing federal facilities and protecting officers? Or is it about the right of elected officials to oversee and demand accountability? They're fundamentally at odds here.
So let's try to sum this up. We have this incident at Delaney Hall. Drastically different stories about what happened. Mayor Baraka arrested, charges dropped. Representative McIver facing serious federal charges. And the Political reaction is just completely split down the middle. Different ideologies seeing totally different things.
That's pretty much it. And we're left with some really big unanswered questions, like, was this legitimate oversight by the Democrats, or did it cross into obstruction, maybe even illegality?
And did McIver's actions actually constitute assault under federal law, based on the evidence?
The key legal question. And then the political one. Are these charges against her politically motivated, like she claims?
Yeah. Definitely a lot for people to think about.
Yeah.
What's a final thought you'd leave our listeners with on this?
Well, I just encourage you, the listener, to think about that balance. The balance between the need for government oversight,
right,
which is vital, right, for transparency, accountability.
Absolutely.
And the need to maintain security at federal facilities. That's important, too. Where do you draw the line? And maybe consider, what are the long-term ripple effects if clashes like this between Congress and the executive branch become more common? So, yeah, take a look at the different sources, weigh the perspectives we've talked about, and, try to form your own informed view on what this all means.